Hi, everyone. Happy Sunday. My name is Ingrid Jean-Baptiste. I'm the founder and director of the Chelsea Film Festival that is celebrating its 8th annual edition with 130 films from 18 different countries until Monday on Film Festival Plus. Please support the arts and emerging filmmakers during these very challenging times. I am very honored to present to you our annual Chelsea Film Festival Climate Change panel in partnership with Sierra Club, the largest and most effective grassroots environmental movement in America. Please allow me to introduce our special guest for today. I'd like to welcome Marta Stoepker. She is the Associate Communications Director at the Beyond Cold's Sierra Club media team. Our next guest is Darin Olien. He is the executive producer of the Netflix TV series Down to Earth with Zac Efron and the founder and visionary of Superlite. Coleman is the founder of ARID agency. Josh Fox is a documentarian and recently wrote and directed Gasland. And last but not least, Josh Burstein is the host and showrunner of SPACEDROP and The Last Glimpses that was just released on Amazon Prime. I'm going to hand it over to you, Josh.
Thanks so much, Ingrid. And thank you all for joining the virtual Chelsea Film Festival. Not exactly the preferred way to enjoy cinema, but we're making do. Marta, special shout out to you and Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign specifically. It's our lovely sponsor supporting this small business festival that's owned by women of color. So I am your moderator, Josh Burstein. Just this month, as Ingrid said, our project SPACEDROP dropped on Amazon Prime. It's offering a first-hand look at how the average person would live off planet, which is sort of worst case scenario of what we're describing right now. And I want to open up this conversation because specifically the reason I made it was that the only thing that I think Republicans and Democrats agree on right now is that space is cool. So trying to appeal to the furthest middle is what we're going to be framing for the next hour, and we'll open up the Q&A for 15 minutes at the end as well. So let's start the discussion talking about climate change with the phrase climate change, which sometimes I call temperature weirding because I don't think anyone can disagree with that. But Darin, you talk about human change. Can you lead us off and detail why?
Yeah, well, you know, clearly the planet is going through changes, and there's devastation. Hell, I'm sitting in my yurt, which was as a result of the 2018 fire that wiped out in Malibu, that wiped out everything I owned. So needless to say, I'm sitting in the result of changes, and I really feel like I want to emphasize the human change that's needed in order for all of us, bipartisan, to understand that we need to change our ways from a microcosm of how we're taking care of ourselves, and as that relates to the macrocosm of how we affect the planet, even down to a single-use plastic, how the petroleum and the estrogens of drinking from plastic is affecting your environmental microsystem, as well as discarding that plastic in the environment is affecting the overall ecosystem. So that's really where I'm focused in desiring that shift and that change that I think, like just what you said, kind of right down the middle, where we all can meet and we all can understand that we need to regain our sovereignty back. And that's really where I'm focused on an individual level as it permeates throughout on a collective level.
Terrific. And Marta, you know, why does how we actually frame this issue matter so much in communications?
Yeah, I will say, so narrative and language is what I'm always kind of thinking about, right? And it was a couple of days ago where I was looking at some messaging that we had put together, and I couldn't believe just how far along we've come in terms of the conversation around climate change. Like even just a year or two ago, we didn't really talk about it in certain parts of the country. We didn't want to emphasize that. We wanted to focus on other parts of what was going on. But more and more, we're seeing people just looking at polling and research, become increasingly more aware of it, more concerned about it. And so I think for us right now, we have to talk about it earnestly and honestly wherever we can, because it is affecting people around the country and around the world. But getting it right, we want people to feel brought into the movement. We want people to feel inspired by the movement. And so how we talk about it, we really want to make sure that we are doing so in a way that people can be a part of the conversation with us. So.
Speaking of narrative language, Josh, can you speak to, how film and rich media can better integrate the climate message into the end product and not just a link at the end of the credits?
Well, I mean, first of all, let me just say that my work comes from the frontline communities that don't have to think about climate change. They're in the middle of climate change, or they don't have to think about who's responsible because they're in the middle of fighting who's responsible, who are the fracking companies, the oil companies, the people who are destroying their backyards and poisoning and toxifying the whole situation, right? So when we talk about climate change and who's on the front line, obviously from fires in Malibu to fires in Denver to fracking fields in Pennsylvania, to coal mines in West Virginia, to people being swamped in the southern coast of Louisiana, there is like a very distinct divide between people who are directly bearing the brunt of the crisis and people who still haven't been in that space, which is the reason I think why we're seeing a more advanced conversation on climate change, because simply more and more people are now seeing that front line exists and it can really affect their life and destroy everything in their life, right? We're looking at a planet right now that's on life support, and we have basically 5 years to change every human system on Earth. That is the most monumental task that anyone on Earth and any species on Earth has ever attempted to achieve, right? And we're doing that without a consensus about, everything has to change, because we know everything has to change. But there are forces who are contributing to the opposite messaging, which is that nothing has to change, right? And those are the oil companies and the Republican Party in the United States and other authoritarian forces around the world. So we have to be very clear about the fact that there is not only the most monumental task facing humanity in front of us, but also significant opposition from people who don't believe in science, from people who invest in authoritarian ways of being, and who have in fact ignored or buried the science on this issue for decades. ExxonMobil knew in the 70s, that their product, oil and gas, caused climate change, right? So these people are criminals. They're guilty of crimes and they should be in jail. So that's number one. Number two is that we have to immediately start to throw away this, because what's really in the conversation right now is about politics. It's not about changing your straws or changing your light bulbs or changing your personal life. It's about changing your politicians. It's about changing those policies. Luckily, we have this incredible document and this incredible life-changing ethos and philosophy called the Green New Deal, which is in front of us, which would cost in the order of trillions of dollars, but it is actually a plan, which is amazing, which would actually solve the problem. So what has to happen now is for people to understand that for years and years and years, the people who are propagating this problem, who are causing the fires in Malibu, who are causing the fires in Denver, who are causing water and air to be polluted and contaminated in Pennsylvania and West Virginia and New York and all across the spectrum and all across the world, those people have names and addresses, and they have to be identified and they have to be shut down. And the policies that to be enacted are very, very simple: 100% renewable energy, justice for frontline communities, stopping all future fossil fuel production, banning fracking, and holding the fossil fuel companies accountable for their egregious misdeeds across the world, and getting really serious about that. Luckily, we have a $2 trillion climate plan from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, which was written in conversation, right, with AOC, Bernie Sanders, and the Sunrise Movement, the people at the forefront of the Green New Deal conversation. So you have a real amazing and grand compromise that's happened between centrists in government, which are Biden and Harris and those kind of people, right, and the progressives in the party, and that is an amazing thing. That is an incredible thing. That is a moment of real enthusiasm that we need to embrace, because it doesn't do everything that I'm saying that we need, but it is a really strong step forward. So we absolutely must, if we're going to talk about climate change, get Donald Trump out of office, elect Joe Biden, and then push as hard as hell to move that as close in line with what really science dictates. Or else we're going to see more things like burning Malibu and burning LA and burning Denver and flooded New Orleans and flooded Miami. And we're probably going to see those things anyway, because it's a little bit late to stop some of those severe impacts. But the bottom line is that we have to mobilize as a society. And in order to mobilize as a society, we do have to speak in line with what the science dictates and not necessarily what politics dictates. And that's going to be a shock for a lot of people. So to answer your question, making movies that translate that are what really mobilize people, right? When I made Gasland and Gasland Part 2, those two films mobilized millions of people across the world to ban fracking, and they banned fracking in the Delaware River Basin, in New York State, and Maryland, and California, and 80% of the countries in Europe, because of that mobilization and that movement. So we're talking about movements, we're talking about mobilization, and the narrative definitely helps to demonstrate that. And I think it's important to tell stories that underline the real severity of the crisis without making people feel like they want to shoot themselves, which is the most hard thing about this, because everybody does feel incredibly depressed once you actually get the information.
I definitely want to discuss more how to keep it positive and empowering, and that is a good reason to turn to Haven right now, who had the best way to start the conversation and build a base in the green room, if you want to lead off with your question to all of us. But also just, what are the actions you're promoting right now, especially in terms of onboarding Gen Z for a fight that they're going to need to be, chasing for the next couple decades, and there's not a lot of time on the clock.
I'm sorry to say this, but can you rephrase the question?
Sure. What are the core actions that you're personally promoting right now through your activism in terms of reducing our carbon footprint?
So first things first, if you're going to the path of, like, say, personal, what you can personally do without having to go towards the activism path. So things that what you can do personally is do sustainable things, like if you do have enough money, buy an electric car, stop doing fast fashion, looking into what corporations are putting the most regular day corporations that are putting out the most carbon footprint, going towards more sustainable options overall in your life. There's also where you can give money to grassroots organizations, especially ones in your community or ones that have POC/Indigenous people. So giving money to them because most grassroots organizations are struggling. They have bare minimum to set up things, especially with the pandemic, since what I've seen is that, yes, people still care about the climate change, but also the pandemic has been hard on everyone. So we've been focused more on the pandemic. People are still out there. People are still trying to figure out ways to get engagement while being safe because of the pandemic. So giving money to grassroots organizations in your area, or just if you have spare time, whatever your passion is, if you're great at art, helping the people that are around you that do that, in the organizations, giving them your support however you can that way. If you're going towards the activism route, start in your community, because for me, the most rewarding work that I've ever done was in my community, because I saw more change and I was able to change the people around me. So simple things would be going to city council meetings or going to the electricity board in your city. I did that. I started when I was 11. I came every single meeting they had until they got so annoyed that they just roll my eyes and wait for me to stop talking. They were just so used to me. But then that did help, and we ended up closing down the power plant this summer. And so we got change done that way. And so go to your Congress people. They have offices. They usually listen. You can send messages. Or, like I've said, go to the organizations in your area and talk to them, because everyone, we love having help, and it's nice to see new people. And if you're in, there's a climate bubble of people, and if you are in a different bubble where most of the things that the people that you talk to are, say, talking about art, and you want to go into the climate sphere, and you can bring what you have from the art, like the people that you talk to that love your content, and bring them into the climate sphere with you. Because when I'm talking on social media, I'm talking to the scientists, the people that already believe and think about climate change 24/7. So you can use your things that you know in your little bubble sphere that you have, and putting content in there that's from other spheres, to get them involved in what you want to be involved in too.
Great. And Josh, we'll definitely touch on how to change the political climate in a sec, but I think to stick with some of these personal choices, what do we all consider some of the most sustainable ways to live? I know, Darin, you're a hunter of superfoods. Are there, ways that being better mentally and physically to ourselves really can have a huge impact on the world?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's that whole thing of as Maslow very eloquently stated, like if we're taking care of ourselves and we have the energy and the fortitude and the strength and the power and the clarity of mind, number one, it's an inner game. So all of this stuff is incredibly, especially the climate that we're in, it's incredibly depressing on every level. So the focus of taking care of yourself in your inner world is important, whatever that is to you, and the meditation and stopping and turning off some of the agendas and focusing on yourself, and also just making sure that you're eating well and drinking well and all of that stuff. And that creates that strength of you to be able to, because we all know that once you have yourself sorted out, or at least in a positive direction, you have more energy to respond, you have clearer thought to step into your life and to contribute. Because if you're unhealthy and not feeling well, then we all know when you're sick, you're sitting on the couch and you can't do anything. So definitely, I always like to make sure that those connections are made, because we can't divorce ourselves and our bodies and our ways of being and fight for something that is also incongruent. So that is looking at, just like Hayan said, there's a lot of things that we can do personally that yes, it feels small, but at the end of the day, it's aligning to the bigger good and the bigger mission. And more times you pull that string, you realize the intensity. For example, I have this investigation side on my podcast where it's called Fatal Conveniences. Every time I investigate something, from Teflon on dental care, literally it's already known. The FDA knows about it. It's causing cancer. It's all of these things. And yet those industries are also polluting the planet. So when we are aware of these things, we can make a change of not putting Teflon in our mouth as dental care, that literally is starting to shoot back towards those companies, and we're not going to use those products anymore. And the other thing that I'll say is, in spite of all of this, the climate change and COVID and all the intensity, I am definitely focused on solutions more than anything else, from power, water, food, shelter, sovereignty. And that is a bipartisan thing. But I am aware now more than ever that there's some incredible companies that are coming out and permeating through all of this. And also some of the big boys, even though they might be greenwashing a little bit, they're getting into the game. I was just in a conversation with an incredible organization doing a lot of regenerative agriculture in the US, and they were approached by some of the four big oligarchies in the United States creating most of our food, that actually came to them saying, we want to transition completely over. And that's going to take a while, but they actually signed on to that. So the amount of things that I think, all of the pressure that we're starting to put on these businesses, and I've talked to several others, from Visa actually supporting small businesses that no one knows about, even though they're not doing everything appropriately on many levels, companies are actually wanting to do some things, and it comes from all of us putting pressure. It's us, it's the customer, it's the people that care. These people are seeing the writing on the wall. So again, I'm trying to do everything I can to align with those organizations, with those people. And Josh brings up all of those incredible points that, you know, this is the reality that's going on. And we have to keep getting people like this, us together, align and get action done. And I'm not, I also don't have I definitely believe in voting and all of those things. But at the same time, I've been around the world. I have seen governments fail over and over and over again. I really believe the power of people coming together and solving the issues. And that puts the pressure on the governments more than anything.
Yeah, Josh, Marta, I mean, how do we encourage that kind of consumerism when, you know, if Bezos changes his supply chain, that could be a lot more powerful than a single state's policy initiative? I mean, obviously we should be hitting it from all angles, but what do you think actually influences the boardroom? How can people listening right now advocate for that?
So I think people have way more power than they think that they do, especially, so I work in the energy sector. We own the electricity that is coming to us. What happens is a utility goes in a room, they propose that they want to build something like a coal plant or a gas plant or clean energy. And then the utility, the Energy Commission either says yes, or they say no, or they ask them to shift course. At the end of the day, it is our money that is actually going into whatever energy is being built. And so you have a voice in the states to decide, what kind of energy do you want to come into your house? What kind of energy do you want to be investing your money in? We are the customer. And so we have a right, at least with the utilities, to express what we want. And clean energy is it's just cheaper, it's better, it's safer. And I think it's a long-term investment, while fossil fuels are a very big risk. So just like looking at your energy bill, like, and figuring out, like, what does this look like? This is your money. This is our money that we spend every single month. And people right now are having a really hard time paying those bills because we are not investing as much in clean energy and local clean energy as we should. It's making bills more expensive. So I think that, like, it's really important to think about, what can I do locally? I totally agree with you, Haven. I started in local politics, city of Chicago, loved it, because that is where you got to see the change more immediately. And what happens locally tends to inspire what happens nationally. And so if you can participate in your community about what you want it to look like in terms of its energy, that has you have a lot of power, because it's our money. So I think that that's one route, that's one boardroom that I'm interested in getting into, because if you can bring this to the public utility commissions or your public service commission in your state, the people that are deciding how we power your community, that also will have a big impact on shareholders. I mean, that own part of these utilities. They are the Warren Buffetts of the world, and they want to make sure that their money is not being wasted on bad investments. And so I think it's really important for customers to constantly express what they want out of their energy utility, so that they can get, we can stop burning coal, we can stop building gas plants, and we can really go all in on clean energy, which is domestic power, and it's manufacturing, and it's transportation here in the United States. And so I think for me, it's how are we influencing utilities to think differently and to be bolder and stop taking customers' money and putting into places that is extremely risky, which is a gas plant or the continuation of a coal plant. So that's kind of one way I would say, you know, for us, how we can get involved in shaping the energy sector from a financial standpoint. I hope that answers your question.
Josh, you're muted.
Marta, I think you really correctly identified one of the huge transition points that needs to happen right away. It's at the power sector, right? And that is one of the easiest things for us to do, is to transfer out of frack gas power plants and out of coal plants to renewable energy and storage. I worked for years with a group called the Solutions Project. I was one of the founders of it in 2010, which premiered first the idea of 100% renewable energy, which was Mark Jacobson's plans out of Stanford University that have been widely heralded as like one of the ways that we can get to 100% renewable energy. And, you know, he first came into that conversation saying, well, look, this is the plan, just do it. What's wrong? Where's the plans are here. We just gave them to Governor Cuomo in New York. What's the problem? As very much that science mentality. And now he has come around to the view, which I was saying to him for years, which is this is all political. He was like, the only way that these people are going to do this is if you get the governors to do it. And the only way you get, or the utilities to do it, right? You either line up at FERC and make sure that those regulatory commissions are actually understanding that the citizens don't want dirty energy, they want clean energy. Or you have politicians in office that understand that, because you've campaigned for them. And I'll just give you this example. I mean, I agree with everything that you guys are saying. We have to do all those things, right? I agree with Haven in terms of the local politics. It's always about visiting the local regulatory commissions and all the things that you were speaking about changing your power, because we have that power. But I'll just give you this example. So let's say, which is true, like I live in the woods in Pennsylvania for the most of the time, or in New York City here, right? Where I get water out of the tap. And the watershed, which is where I live in PA, right, which provides water to 16 million people, 5% of Americans, right, is about to get fracked to hell. Huge proposals from BP and Hess and Shell and Chevron and Exxon and Chesapeake Energy to come in and just put fracking wells all throughout the entire place, okay? Now, I could sit in my house and change my energy supply. I could change my toothpaste. I could change my light bulbs. But I still would get fracked. I would get fracked to hell without the politics, right? I could do all those little things and they could help me. And I could feel like I could do yoga, I could become a vegan, I could do all those things and I could feel really good about myself. But unless we mobilized tens of thousands of citizens, organized and mobilized to stop those companies dead in their tracks, which we did, we're totally screwed, right? I have to move. I lose all of my financial everything because most Americans' wealth is all tied up in their house, right? You know, Darin, ExxonMobil should have paid for your house. That's how I see it, right? It is not unreasonable to say to these companies that you don't want to see the impacts of climate change. Well, you should be paying for them, right? That's what it means to hold the fossil fuel industry accountable. And when we say to people like Jeff Bezos, who's done absolutely ridiculous things like naming an arena in Seattle, Climate Pledge Arena, while at the same time he's pushing Republicans for the Senate, it's greenwashing like to beat the band. So I just want to plead with people. I'm not saying the actions of the individual are meaningless. They are meaningful in many ways, but they're meaningful to the individual. And they must, without the political component of what we do, without going and visiting city councils or the FERC commissions or the commissions to do the power plants and making sure that you're organizing and mobilizing politically, we could be much improved as individuals, but we're not saving the planet. We're not saving the watershed. We're not stopping climate change. We're doing something else. So I hate to break it down in that way, but for 12 years, it was everything that I knew and held dear on the line in my area. And we stopped that proposal and saved the watershed and made a beautiful place. And that still exists and breathes and lives in a nature atmosphere to this day and provides clean drinking water to 16 million people. But, you know, that front line is everywhere, as the Rage Against the Machine song says, right? There is no shelter here. The front line is everywhere. The front line is in Malibu. The front line is on every single one of our coastal cities is due to go underwater unless we do this radical shift. And I will underline once again what the scientists at IPCC said. We have 10 years to cut our global emissions in half, which means a 7 or 8% reduction every single year for the next 10 years. Now, if you really think about that in real terms, that means we have 5 years. Because we can't start 5 years from now. It just won't work. So what are the choices? This entire panel can't become about consumerism. It has to be about getting Donald Trump out of office, getting Mitch McConnell out of office, getting the people who are holding the levers of power with a special interest who are destroying the planet out away from the power. Now, I had a conversation with John Dean on my show the other day. John Dean from the Nixon administration, right? The man who was in the Nixon administration and testified against Richard Nixon to bring him down back in the 70s. He was on the show and he was talking about authoritarianism. And I asked him, back in the Nixon days, You had the Clean Water Act, the EPA, National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, all of the Clean Air Act, Safe Drinking Water Act. All of these things happened during the progressive, liberal, left-wing Nixon administration, right? And he said, well, back in those days, the Republicans just thought of that as sound policy. It was good for everybody. It wasn't controversial. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, special interests came in. He said, they bought out our party. And what we're talking about is ExxonMobil. So they're spending more money on buying politicians, right? And they're looking at us doing yoga and laughing. We have to go after those people. You know what I'm saying? We have to transform our mindset. And if you're transforming your body does that, if buying different light bulbs transforms your politics, then it's worthwhile. You know what I'm trying to say? Because if you change your habits personally, the next thing that happens is your politics. If you change your personal habits, right? But it isn't on the level that they're playing chess and we're over on another board playing Parcheesi. We have to go over there and get on the board on which they're playing and win. And when we do that, it's incredible and amazing. Then you meet the best friends you've ever had, like Haven was saying. Then you meet all these extraordinary folks who are fighting alongside of you, right, shoulder to shoulder. And I've been across this world, from Iceland to China to South America to the Amazon to the Samoa, and been with those people in those struggles. And it is an extraordinary thing to take part of. So that's how I think we change ourselves, right? I think we change ourselves by meeting people who are those at the front line in our struggles, and that we become great friends with them, right? Like my friend Mika Maeva in Samoa, battling the rising tides to stop his island from going underwater, or the indigenous environmental monitors in the Amazon who are fighting oil spills that no reporters can get to because they're 12 kilometers into the jungle, right? Or being with dissidents in China who are willing to speak out and spend the rest of their time in jail to stop the coal plants in China. That's real. That's some deep stuff. And that's happening all across America as well. That's happening in downtown LA, where you have environmental racism putting fracking in Latino communities in Los Angeles, or in Chicago, where you have all the coal plants in the poor Black community, right? That stuff is actually happening. It's on all of us to just get involved in that and wake up, realize that is also self-care. That is also self-help. That is also the thing that enriches our lives as well. Not to say anything about what you guys said is, I agree with that. I'm just saying, like, where this battle is playing out, we got to get to the battlefields. We got to get to the front line, as well as the front line in our own minds and hearts.
So let's build that base and talk about the organizing tactics. How do you appeal to the furthest middle? How do you appeal to the disenchanted that are, maybe going to tune out that message if you hear Al Gore's voice, and yet just press the common sense of it all, that this can make economic sense, but more importantly, this makes sense for yourself, for future generations, your area, your community, your backyard. Haven, what's been working for you so far?
So when talking to the furthest middle, you've especially just citizens, it will talk about people who like politicians a little bit in a second. But so talking to regular citizens, we've got to explain that no matter where you live, especially people who live in coastal states, you're already seeing flooding and hurricanes just battering the towns and the cities. And no matter if you put your houses on stilts or whatever you try to do to protect your house is still going to be, it might not be insured. The price of your house will drop. We're seeing that all across the cities on the coastal area. And if you move inland because you're trying to escape that, you like say you move to Colorado where I am, and you move to the mountains or wherever you do, you're gonna still affect the smoke that's clogging our lungs and the fires that are devastating our forests. And then if you move somewhere that's gonna be more drought, there's gonna be less food prices will grow up. You're gonna be affected everywhere. It doesn't matter about your wealth, it doesn't matter about anything. People will still be affected. And so what you can do, because it'll just be scary for everyone. And so the reason why there's so much politics in climate, and the reason why everybody's saying Democrat or the left side, is because the right side is sort of still trying to grasp acknowledging that it exists, which is like, it's not the tooth fairy, it's a literal thing that's killing people. So, and even the left side is still iffy on what they really need, what we really need, but they're at least trying to find initiatives that will scale up to what we need. So at least they are thinking. That's why there's so much politics in climate change, even though it's a science-based thing, because of that. If you're trying to, for talking to politicians, like that are in the middle or in the right side, you would, I've done this before with one of my Congress people in Colorado Springs. Like if you're trying to talk to somebody about climate change, you would go to something that they are very passionate about and tie it back into it. So this one guy, he was my representative. So I went up to him. I think I was 11. So it was the first politician I've ever talked to. And I took his very strong stance on veterans and protecting veterans and the Army. And I explained how green energy jobs like solar panel and wind turbines are great for bringing veterans back into the regular job flow and getting them back into normal society, because it uses their skills that they've used in the Army or wherever they come from. And so it'll use them to get them back into the flow without being so disruptive to them. So I use that to get to them, because if you use harsh words or just scream at them, it's like their mind will block off. So they don't want to talk. So it's just getting through that conversation. But if you open it up saying, this will help something that you really like, and tying it back to this will cost this will cost less, this is why I'm saying this, and it'll get them into an open conversation. That's how you do it with politicians. But yeah.
Yeah, I like spoonfuls of sugar. I talk about gateway drugs for people to give a shit. And I think Josh Fox made a really good one called Gasland. So when it comes to the role of creatives, Marta, when we have a proof of concept like what you're advocating for in Chicago, or a progressive bill in California, or an effective activation that saved Josh Fox's water supply, how do you then scale that or create campaigns, and what would be a creative's role in advocating for those?
I'm so happy you asked this question. I went to art school and then went into politics. Don't ask me how it happened, but it did. And I see that the power of art and culture in moving the conversation forward. I was actually just listening to this really cool podcast called Winds of Change, where they talk about how the CIA might have written a rock band song by this band called the Scorpions, and how that song helped like basically end the Soviet Union. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's amazing that the CIA is using tactics that are using art and culture to change the conversation. And so the Sierra Club, I've been really lucky to work for such an amazing organization that also gets behind that theory. And so how are we making sure that artists are coming into the conversation so that we can reach other people? Like, not everyone's reading the New York Times. They're just not. So some people are watching documentaries like what Josh is putting together. So we made a documentary all about clean energy and how it's impacting people's lives in their communities. It actually was at Chelsea Film Festival, which was very cool. Thank you for that. But also we worked last year with this really cool music festival, art, music, and food called Life is Beautiful. And we worked with an artist there on creating this video art thing called Forest Bath, and it allowed people to immerse themselves in nature together, listening to nature sounds. And at the end, we had this great mission statement about the importance of protecting this place that we all love and how to get involved. And it was really inspiring, and it was really solutions oriented. But people feel things in different ways. And so it's important for us to think through, how are we working with musicians and artists and chefs to have the conversation in their own way, so more people can be brought into that. So we continue to look for artists to help tell that story, and I think it's an important thing that we continue to do. So creatives have a big role to play in all of this.
And I also like that talk about meeting people where they are, because I look at these billboards for new Adam Sandler movies, and I'm just like, who is watching this? Where is this audience? Because that's who we have to reach, because they're probably not, I'm just stereotyping.
Question for Darin.
Well, this is exactly it. So what is the importance of making a reality show when most of a general audience might engage with that as their first chance to see these things firsthand?
Yeah, man. I have to say, it just was a coming together of a lot of things, and so number one, I got to give a shout out to Zac Efron. It's his birthday today, so just thankful for him for seeing that this was possible to use his platform for good. So happy birthday, Zac. So it's funny because I'm intense. I want to get at some of these things. Josh, I resonate with everything you're saying, but I learned a lot in this docuseries, because I think if it was left to me, I had all these colleagues. I had this intense kind of what I wanted to accomplish, how I wanted to accomplish. But as I kind of came in to Zac's fold and his PR team saying, whoa, let's just calm down a little bit. And then the creative on the production side, and really the trust of, hey, we have the same mission. I come to realize that telling the story, we found our way through adventure, through curiosity, through not coming at people or speaking at or down to people. Not that we're all thinking we're doing that, but I think, again, humbly, if it was left up to me, it would have been too intense for people. And so letting go and trusting that the few percent of information we were providing was an invitation, that what we showed was this beautiful planet not a lot of people have been to, incredible scientists and organizations do incredible things that are just in their own little capsule in the middle of Iceland, ways that people are living that are simple to the earth, in Suelu, Sardinia, living long, being healthy. That is a sustainable way of living as well. So it's very interesting how the telling the story from being the invitation of that levity, that invitation of not telling people, but really as a witness, showing them something. And the result of that blew me away. And definitely, Haven, you and I need to talk, because something that occurred from that was not only from a 9-year-old to a 70-year-old, the people that aren't in this space, that aren't necessarily on this call with us, that woke something up saying, listen, I want to be a healthier person. I want to be involved, but I don't know where to go. I don't know how to do it. And so there's this need for these people to come. And so I've been talking to Pepperdine University, talking to Emerson. I was on a UN event with thousands of young delegates. They want to do something, that young generation. And that's a lot of my focus right now, because I can feel they need a place and a direction, and for us to provide something for them to do. So I've been creating opportunity to create peer-to-peer support. So peers, I'm gathering a bunch of researchers, environmental students, and allowing them to do research on topics to then create the narrative that they believe their peers will receive better than, Darin or someone else. So that's the humble nature of the response of Down to Earth that I was just kind of blown away, and still to this day.
Yeah, I'd say everyone, oh, go for it.
Well, I was going to say that I think that it's very true that you can't, I think when you make a movie, it's very different than when you make activism, I have a saying about this, which is that art is about questions and politics is about answers. And art is there to lead people through those questions, right? To actually be sincere in asking the question. So, when I made Gasoline, my question was, is fracking good or not? You know what I mean? And I had to be sincere about it, right? Or else it would have seen it coming, And the same thing with my climate change film, How to Let Go of the World and Love All the Things Climate Can't Change. was what can we do about climate change? Not just, you know, like, is it a bad thing or whatever? You know, that there were actual sincere questions and a journey that you led people on. But then you do need to do the answer part of it too, right? I often do these artist activist workshops where you have a room full of activists and a room full of artists, and they're really fascinating because they speak completely opposite languages. And I am often in both camps, right? I'm an artist, I'm also an activist, right? So on this, I'm being an activist because I'm not going to make art in the middle of a panel. It's just like very hard to do. But what was interesting is I went around the room and I said, okay, tell me in your travels, in your last 5 years as an artist or as an activist, the most persistent question that you woke up with every single morning, right? Tell us that question. And then also write down on a piece of paper your most persistent answer that you've learned over the last 5 years. And it was fascinating because we went around the room and the questions came out. And when the questions happened, it was extremely unsettling. It was very upsetting. You got upset because the question was like, well, how can we stop climate change? What can we do about race relations? And how do, you know, these things were like tearing at your soul. And then the answers came out. And the answers were, organize and mobilize with my community, or, you know, change my diet, or all these things and the answers made you feel good. And that's sort of the interesting relationship between art and politics, right? Art's supposed to kind of make you unsettled. It sort of makes it sort of like get you going, gets you feeling riled up. And politics, they all come out and they say, I have the answer, I have a plan, I have this, I have that. They're there to make you feel happy. So it's an interesting relationship all the time. And so I think, you know, when you're making a piece of art, you have to focus on what is going to be that unsettling question that makes you person engaged, that gets them in, that moves them into that all the time, right? Because I see a lot of documentaries where, you know, they just start with a thesis and I just want to turn it off after 5 minutes because I'm not in the hunt. You know what I mean? I'm not engaged by it. And then it slowly unfolds through a bunch of interviews, the filmmaker's true opinion, right? But for me, it's all about an investigation. And if that investigation, you have to figure out what are the things that you already know. Like we already know climate change is bad. We already know, like, you know, so what is the thing that you don't know, that you're putting on the line in terms of making the film? And I hate to say this, but I have a prior commitment at 4 o'clock, so I have to go in 2 minutes. So this will be my last comment. But I just made a film now about going into nature and knocking down the assumptions of what nature is. Because I think people go out to plants, trees, bugs, you know, water, lizards, you know, that's nature. But there's actually a much deeper reality in nature. And it's a battleground. There are invasive species that came from the colonialists, that came from Columbus, that are battling themselves out in nature right now with indigenous plants and native plants that are vying for trying to keep alive. And it's this fascinating historical investigation when you actually walk into the woods and you know what the plants are, and you know which ones came from 400 years ago, which ones have been there for a very long time, which ones deplete the soil, which ones replenish the soil, which ones give crack essentially to birds that don't give them enough nutrition to fly all the way south, but those are the ones that are proliferating everywhere. And how human beings' relationship to this is nature a best in a vacuum, or do we have a role in it? These are real sincere questions that I just put in my new film. So please do look for that. It's not titled yet. But I'm working on it. But the idea that what we have to put forward to people, I think, which engages them, is not, like you're saying, barking answers at them, right? That's for when they really need the answer. If we're in art and we're making movies, we have to engage people in a viral question, in a question that it takes over for them and they get excited about it. And then they go on that journey with us. I think when that question gets nagging at everyone, it's the way to get people on your train, you know, in your world, and that we can all share in that, in the great mystery of being alive and of not knowing what we're doing at all. You know, so that's what I have to say to that question. But with that, I'm so sorry. I thought we were done at 4, but I do have to have a prior commitment, so I have to go. But thank you so much for having me on this panel. It's really been a wonderful thing to listen to all of you and to learn from this.
Absolutely, Josh. Well, thanks for joining. And speaking of those questions and answers, we're going to turn it to questions and answers. I have one quick question before that, which was for Haven. And that's just as we're trying to really push for climate change and I would say everybody on this call, including Josh, talks about making the first step feel more approachable. I think there's also the positive conditioning of feeling wins, and it's a really tough time right now, and it's not like we're ever going to save every fish in the ocean. So how do you positively reinforce through setbacks? How do you feel any level of satisfaction with half measures, and have victories so that we continue to grow our numbers and grow support and grow energy and momentum?
Hi. Since when we do get victories, which is not a lot, so it's bold of you to assume that that we like small victories. Like I said, the power plant, it's very that we got it closed when it's very big, since it's now closing 12 years earlier than scheduled, which is big, and so it'll be closing in 2003, which is really no 2023. It's not going back. So when that did happen, I celebrated with the people that I worked on, and I was just for like half a day, and I was like giving virtual high fives, like yay, since it happened in June. So we celebrated it for a little bit, and then I continued on to my work, because with the solemn victories, if we stick in that moment of it, we'll end up being stuck. Like, because it was a big thing, but if I stayed in, yay, I did something, I'm gonna pause. We still need to keep moving and moving and moving. So when we do get victories, we celebrate it, and then we continue on to the next. And for setbacks, Gen Z itself, like who's been now taking charge in activism, and especially climate, has when we do get setbacks, it's different than adults that I've seen. It's because like adults, they get like sad, and then they're like, now what do we do? And then Gen Z's like, oh frick, we gotta do something. And they're like, let's just punch the wall down. And so we try to find other ways that may be a little bit more disruptive, but still are effective. So taking more initiative at these things, because as Gen Z has been pulling down things that we don't like, that we've seen. So we're taking it, just keep doing that obstacle course that is to get what we need. Because even though we find setbacks, we're still needing to punch down these walls, because nobody else is there. People are getting stuck 3 walls behind us, even though we just made a door. So just continuing on to what you can do, and once you hit that wall, go back and say, what did we do wrong? How can we punch the wall harder? Yes.
I'm already signed up for your class pass for a boxing class. That's great. Okay, we got questions. So Carla says, Darin, would you consider doing another documentary? I found it very eye-opening and heartbreaking. Heart emoji.
Absolutely. We're currently in negotiation with Netflix for a season 2. So hopefully all that goes well, and we will be on the trail again for sure. And then I'm also developing a solution-based show around destruction zones, and how individual families and homes can gain their power back with maybe a different menu of archaic ways of building. For example, it's kind of insane to build the same way in California when it's literally, and always has been, a fire ecology. So we need to look at these systems differently, power, water, food systems, again, gaining our power back, so that we don't give all of our power over to the monopolies that seemed like a good idea in the advent of our industrial revolution, but now is turning against us. So yes, the truth is we're moving forward, and hopefully season 2 will happen.
I also agree that we probably shouldn't dig any more dinosaur juice out of California. So as we try and advocate for that, Reach Kramana at email is asking, what are the 3 things we could all do today to help the cause, besides voting? So if each of you can give one very direct answer for people to do, they'd appreciate it.
I'll go first. So one thing you can do today is usually there's different. What you can do is I'm thinking of like the best one. So today you can. Okay, you can go and look into, since there's big companies, not companies, organizations, usually they have branches in your area. So I know like Sierra Club, they have their little branch in Colorado, and 350 and a bunch, and Sunrise. You can go to them and say, hey, what can I do? You can look into their initiatives. You can see what they are doing right now, see what they have, what they can give you to do. They usually have public resources, and they have different things like the Beyond Coal for Sunrise, not Sunrise. I'm mixing up words for Sierra Club. And so so you can go there and find out more about those, and then learn about that, and then see what they have to offer for you to help. So going to your local divisions of these organizations and seeing what you can do to help them. It's always really fun, and you make new friends.
Thanks, Haven. Yes, join the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. We are in every state in America, and we are doing a lot of amazing, amazing stuff. So thank you for that shout out. I think another big thing for me, because I'm always thinking about conversation and narrative, is one, talk about this today with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Just having the conversation is really important. That's the best way to build the movement, is to talk with each other. So do that. And the other thing is read. Please read, listen, watch. Well, maybe not watch, but definitely listen to and read your local news. Is really, really important, that when you're paying attention to what the local reporting is saying about your issues, and sharing that, whatever good reporting that you see on Twitter, on Facebook, and Instagram, to help really shift that conversation in the news. I'm a firm believer in local press. We're seeing it go away, and that is a huge problem for us in terms of telling these really, really important stories about how energy is affecting us locally, both with our health and our money. So that's another big way. And then go for a walk. Walking is lovely. In your neighborhood is probably like, it's important to like spend time in your neighborhood and be grateful for the nature that surrounds you. So those are my top three.
Yeah, nice. Those are good ones. I would say eat more plants, lower your consumption of meat, fish, dairy, eggs, without a doubt. Eliminate single-use plastic for sure. Focus on create your own water distillation, RO system. Put it in glass, and don't buy plastic water bottles. And then the other thing, try to replace one of your home use products, and find a product line and a company that's using better single-use plastic, or not using it at all, glass and whatnot, and vote with your dollars towards a company, even if you have to pay a little bit. Vote with your dollars towards a company that's doing good for you and doing good for the planet.
Absolutely. And I would just add, not voting was one of the questions, but I would say vote down ballot. It's incredibly important to know what's happening in your local elections, and that's where the fight is. So I also butchered that name of who presented it. It was actually Romina, who was one of the directors in this film festival. So that is quite excellent. And I think that we are running out of time. So I just want to thank all the panelists for joining, thanking the Sierra Club for sponsoring, thanking the Chelsea Film Festival for being ambitious enough to try and make this whole thing work online, and it really has. So last words all around.
This has been fun. I'm glad I got the opportunity to talk. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a nice day.
Yeah, thanks everyone. This was really great. And I will say that climate change is terrifying, but there is a silver lining, which is that it's going to push us to be innovative and to be more community focused than ever before. And I think that that is all very, very good things. So just try to like lean into where you can on this issue, the solution, so that we can get through this together. So, but thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
That's perfect, Marta. Right off of the heels of that, yes, for sure. Focus on solutions, focus on what you can do to be a better human, and charge forward in every way that you know is possible. And thank you so much. Totally stoked to be here.
Thank you, Ingrid. We'll let you finish this off.
I want to thank you, Josh, for this amazing, flawless conversation. It just moved perfectly. I want to really thank also Marta for allowing us to partner again this year. This is not the first time we do it. It's the first time virtually, but we've had many years of partnership now, and I think it's just growing so wonderfully. Thank you, Darin, for coming on board today and taking the time. Haven, wonderful meeting you as well. I'm very hopeful for the new generation, and congratulations again for everything you do. It has inspired me. I hope the audience has been also inspired today to donate to the Sarah Club. The link is actually posted in the newsletter. It's been out yesterday. We're going to post again. Please donate, help however you can to be part of the change. And I wish you a beautiful Sunday, and I look forward to seeing you soon and maybe next year, physically, hopefully at the Chelsea Film Festival. Thank you all. Bye-bye now. Thank you.